Space, the final frontier. Well, okay, not really. All right, take two. Here in the Mitten State, welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone.
And we are back with the Code 47 podcast on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. This is episode number 151. I am Charlie Carden, your servant, Trek Lord of West Michigan, joined as always by my number one, Peter Stein. And most importantly, we have our most celebrity guest-ish. He's a guest. He wouldn't call himself a celebrity because he's a very humble individual. Dr. Trek himself, Larry Nemecek, is guesting with us today. Larry, hello.
Hi,
Welcome.
guys. Good to be back with you. And I'm just sitting here trying to wonder if you've ever poked around to see who the Trek Lord of Eastern Michigan is.
I hold complete sway, in my opinion, because, well, recently in Eastern Michigan, there's a Comic-Con over in Metro Detroit, which is actually where I'm originally from, called Motor City Comic-Con. My wife and I ran a Star Trek trivia there about a month ago. And I actually did not dominate there because as I was reading one of my questions, it didn't make sense to me. So we're just going to skip this one. And we had to move on. So you're right. You might be right that I still have to depose someone over on the east side. I think I rule over here. That's what I think.
Or it could be an empty, position that needs.
Right.
Anyway, I know it just maybe.
Someone will come along and prove me wrong. Like I said, you are the only person that I would never want to play Star Trek trivia against because I would have no chance. The guy who wrote the book.
There's so much now though. It's really hard for any one person to keep up with it. Like when I was a kid, it was nothing.
Right. Right. There was not that much to know.
Right.
Right.
It was a lot, but it was manageable. Yeah.
Right. Now it's now you got to have the books of Larry Nemecek to keep everything straight.
Well, people say that like, oh, he's the trivia. I go, no, don't lay that on me. But I'll say was what I said, but I'll just say I either know it, I know who to ask, or I know where the answer's buried. Where the bones are buried. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I have the beginnings of that myself, but we've got an awesome show. Larry handpicked our random episode, which is not random, but we're going to do a deep dive into one of the finest episodes I used the word heritage earlier, and Larry said, well, I hear people say legacy. Heritage legacy. It's still next generation. This is all
I like heritage. Don't get me wrong. I said now if you say legacy now, people think you're talking about the would-be series. So heritage is great.
Yes, excellent. And yeah, we'll get into that. And then we're going to wrap up TNG, our first ever series that ended on purpose. As opposed to the previous, we ended Enterprise, we ended Prodigy, which is still floating. We ended Discovery, we ended Enterprise, and TAS. But this one, they said, nope, we're actually going to end it and move on to movies. So that's what they did, and
that's part of why you got what you got too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do that, we're going to blast through this real quick, talking about the wonderful friends on our Patreon Super Squad, the folks that get our shows early, our shows without commercials, great Discord benefits, etc. As little as $2 a month after having your first week for free. And actually the first month at 50% off. There's all kinds of different great ways to get that going. Folks like Derek Trevelyan, my friend, the Figure Dude, Francie, who does my wife's hair, Luke Lore, Mr. Xbox Expansion Pass, and my Uncle Tim there in South Haven, Michigan. All Patreons. Also John Sedorf, Brendan Myers, Corey in HD, Matthew Keel, my buddy Kurt Krug helps us out with all the great interviews. Actually, Larry, you're one of the few I met on my own, but otherwise, a lot of the interviews I do actually come from our friend Kurt. He's a great guy. Tanya Lee, Chipotle Bear, Famous Seamus, J Newport 007, Cam the Movie Man, who we're going to circle back to him in a second because he gets his honorarium this week, and Brian Osterman, a.k.a. Darth Prozac. But bopping back up to Cam, and Larry, I think he's going to join in the fun. Cam gets a Star Trek race and a job. Gosh, we're going to go in reverse order. So Larry, you go first. I just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But yeah, what do you think? So Cam the Movie Man, I typically will take inspiration from the person's like handle myself.
Oh.
Or whatever.
Okay, guy. I'm sorry, guys.
Don't worry
What are we
about
doing here?
it. See, Cam is one of our Patreons.
Right.
And
This is the winner.
he's this week's winner, so he gets a Star Trek alien race and
Right.
a Star Trek occupation.
I thought you said he was an Andorian and a lieutenant or something.
Oh, look! You just picked mine. I like it. Thanks. No, that could be yours. No, I'm coming up. I'm assigning him one.
Oh, I thought you'd already done it, and you were just. Oh, okay.
Oh, we don't work that. I only work that hard on the document. I don't work that hard on this
okay.
part.
Okay. Well, I hope you're editing.
Nah, no, it's like life. It's raw. No, I like this
Oh,
part.
okay.
It sounds good to me. It sounds good. So, what do you think? What would you assign Cam in the Star Trek universe?
Well, I hope he doesn't take this as an insult. I'm going to do my thing because I think they're so underserved, but I want to make him a Tellarite, and I don't want him to be a biker Tellarite. I want him to be a good Tellarite.
Okay, what does a good Tellarite do for a living?
They're great engineers.
Okay,
Used to be in the old days. It was like, well, if you weren't going to have a human engineer, have a Tellarite engineer. But that was among the people that even knew Tellarites existed.
Right, yes. Because the first one you ever met wanted to get in a fist fight with Sarek, and it's like, dude.
Right.
Come
But they're
on now.
Federation members, so what does that tell you? They're founding members, so what does that tell you? They're not wacko, fly-by-nights.
Exactly.
So,
they're a little grumpy.
Not all nutso.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
I mean,
like that.
What's funny is how Tellarite statures come up over the years, and the Vulcans have gotten, when you figure out all the things that the Vulcans have kept hidden over the centuries and didn't tell us, it's like that Spock statue, that pedestal that Spock was on is kind of coming down a little bit. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Sarek. Oh my God, Sarek is okay. Anyway.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Sarek. We go on about Sarek. All right, Peter, take a stab.
I am going to go with another race that is from a prequel period, although Tellarites technically aren't. I'm going to go with Denobulan.
Oh, okay. I love the
Denobulan.
Denobulans.
Speak Denobulan. And I'm going to go with, just based on the handle here, I'm going to go with a Federation news anchor.
That was going to be mine.
No, that's a thing now.
It is a thing.
That was going to be mine, but I'll still use news anchor. So I'm going to go in reverse here because I like news anchor. I'm not going to jump off of it. But it kind of reminds me of Futurama. Do you remember when they had the news team, that the one was the big green alien, Morbo, and then he had the little human woman? He is a Klingon news anchor on the Federation News Service, screaming at this little woman who is his co-host. Oh, Cam.
That is fake news.
That is, yeah, exactly. It's Cam. It's all in good fun. We're very glad to have you on board. And then lastly, our secret friend Super Squad, the awesome Nias family of the Twin Cities, Sean, Stella, and Henry. Thank you for all that you do. Again, patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Try us out for a week. Listen to our great interviews, bonus programs, and all of our regular stuff. You will stick around. And speaking of stick around and keeping us in suspense, we do know we're seeing Strange New Worlds finally on July 17, but we now have an official trailer after having little clips strung along all the way from, I think, back last fall when we got several minutes of the crew as Vulcans and some footage of the conclusion of what's obviously going to be the cliffhanger in part one. But we got this great trailer, and I've watched the screener that I said I've got. Larry, I know you've got it to watch yet.
I know nothing.
I know nothing.
I know nothing.
But the part that they had in here that had me slapping the couch because I was too excited was my favorite stand-up comedian, Patton Oswalt, as a Vulcan, exchanging the dichotomy of what a high five is with Spock. It was more than I could handle. It was absolutely terrific. So, Larry, what did you think? What did you think about the trailer?
Well, no, it was a really. This sounds odd, but I think it was like one of the best trailers they've done because it just felt like a trailer. It didn't feel like they were screaming and reaching for the rafters or inserting some, archaic rock music into it or something. I mean, that's movies, I know, but it wasn't zippy, snippy, snappy. It was just. It felt like, I don't know, it felt like more like a fan-made trailer than a promotional trailer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the fan-made trailers give you the most punch because they're being made by the people that care the most, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, it
ways.
felt like it wasn't made by some promotional committee that had never watched a frame of Star Trek. It felt
Right.
like it was.
Yeah, it felt like someone who actually like had watched the episodes and then was putting stuff in there to kind of give you an idea, rather than just like,
here's the good bits,
here's
the
here's a
taste.
snippet. Here's a thing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Gotcha. Good stuff, Peter.
I thought it was interesting. I'm still a little hesitant towards some of the stuff that they've been doing with Spock. So the high five thing, as much as it was funny, I was just kind of like, oh no.
There's some more questionable stuff. There's some more questionable stuff with Spock coming up. I hate
you
to
know,
say it.
but you guys know that the SpongeBob trailer was not canon.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Okay. Just
Yes, I know that.
It's been keeping me up nights. I know what to do.
just didn't want
I was
that
sitting there
line.
trying to weave the multiversal lines together to make that work.
They flew through there, and then the lower decks people were there, and then they came back, and SpongeBob was there. I just
Worf has got to stop punching shuttlecraft through anomalies.
Oh my God,
man.
you're right. It all spun off of parallels. That's what all the little enterprises. One of them must have been SpongeBob.
Yeah. Forget the Lower Decks finale. We have had, it all started with parallels.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So yeah, I'm really fired up for this. And again, in having that screener, I tried to really stretch it out, but now we finished it this morning, and I'm like, what am I going to do for the next? I assume the last 5 episodes we'll get another screener after the show comes out. So I don't know. I'll just have to keep watching. Right now I'm also doing prep because in our next episode, we're doing a series recap and then a kind of a look forward with Todd, who's my co-host on one of our other podcasts. So I'm rewatching the series right now, and it's just, with so much content, you forget just how good it is. I just absolutely adore this show. So I am really, really looking forward to what we get in July, especially since this is the only show that we're getting for the rest of the year. And it's the only show we've had because Section 31 doesn't count to me. Not a fan, but we don't need to get into that.
Well, it's of everything over the years, including Star Trek V, including so many things, the motion picture. It's like Section 31 it's almost like Paramount has already put it in a memory hole. I'm starting to get the feeling they've like locked it away in a box and no one. They're selling the DVDs, but it's like when those are sold, is that name even going to be spoken by anyone?
They're gonna They're gonna lock it under the jail. It's just not gonna exist anymore. I don't know. Yeah, it was. We'll call it a thought experiment. We'll leave it at that. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's move on to talking about one of the finest of TNG, one of the real breakouts. And this was at Larry's request when he agreed to be on our show, which I'm super fired up about. This is great. But we're talking about season 3, episode 15 of Star Trek: The Next Generation is yesterday's Enterprise. I'm going to read a summary, and then Larry, I'm content to just kind of follow your lead. Tell me about your experience with this, because you were there for so much of it.
Well, not there, not the time. I wound up being closer than I ever thought I would be, and then made up for it later, I'll say. But go ahead.
That works for me. All right, quick cap. While investigating a temporal rift, the Enterprise encounters a ghost from its own past. He said, which is what Picard said. The USS Enterprise C, which travels 22 years from the future, not into the future, and changes the course of history. Whoops. With the flow of history change, Tasha Yar still lives, and the Federation is losing a decades-long war with the Klingon Empire. Whew. My goodness. Larry, talk to us about this episode. So you said you weren't there because your first book, with the blue cover, which I got when I was 17, it was 1993.
Okay.
Wasn't it? I think. So I was 17.
It was after the 5th season. So yes.
It was after the 5th season. So that was in the 5th season was.
It ended in the spring of 92, and then the book. Yeah.
Oh, so the book did come out in 92.
92, 93-ish. I'm trying to remember if it came out that fall or into the spring, because we may have rushed it. No, because it was delayed. Oh, that's part of the story of the book. It got delayed, so it was either end of 92 or early 93.
Okay. Yeah, I remember driving around. It was like I was always with me, because it was in season 5 that I became a real watched it every week kind of. Like I'd watched the show when it first came on. I was in junior high.
In a big club.
And it kind of fell in and out with me. And then somehow, some way in the 5th season, I was locked in, watching it every week. I was one of these guys that taped it on the VCR and paused out the commercials. So I had an army of VHS tapes. That was me. Now it's all, I have the discs behind me, but I watch it on VOD because I haven't purchased. And but yes, I used to have armies of tapes. But this was the classic. So you weren't there, air quotes, but you made up for it later. So what does that mean? Tell us about your involvement.
Yeah, well, at the time, I guess by 3rd season, I was doing my concordance, which was like Bejo's concordance encyclopedia, just for me. And the back of my mind, a kid in Oklahoma, I'm thinking, oh, it would be great if I could sell this. And nobody was doing anything, and nobody was rushing to do that kind of a book. And I thought, oh, surely there's somebody out there that'll do this. But in the meantime, I had made contact with Richard Arnold at the conventions, and he just wet his pants over what I was doing, because he told me later that this is before the internet. There was no Memory Alpha. There was no Okuda's encyclopedia. The only thing the writers had for their internal reference was send their assistant down to the shelf and, start reading through scripts and find that mention of that thing, and and they had a turn, and then they had a memory turnover. Here's the other thing that the first 2 seasons were the Chaos on the Bridge years, but Maury Hurley was there for the last year and a half of that. And then he left. And then, Michael Pillar, we get into the story of yesterday's Enterprise here in a minute, but he came to it late. Michael Wagner was the showrunner for about a month, and then he left. And Michael came to it late. And the early part of the 3rd season was just hell on wheels. He said they were riding the rims, and things started to settle down finally. And he brought another tone to the show, more of the family than the creature of the planet of the week. And and that's all that chaos is exactly what's going on with yesterday's Enterprise. Amazing. But that was the DNA of this. But what it also meant was all the people from Michael forward, like nobody from the first 2 years was around starting season 3 onward. Well, a couple of them were there, but they Melinda Snodgrass left, and somebody else. Anyway, by the end of 3rd season, nobody was connected to the first 2 years. And so one of the things was the memory, and occasionally that bit them. Anyway, what I'm saying here is they went from like analog, oh my God, you've saved my butt, because now I have something I can reference.
Right.
And that's what led to the companion coming out. So in researching all of that on the back end, I got to know this. But as a kid sitting there watching the show, I was just home doing my concordance. I had a tenuous link to them. Yeah. And I'd met Eric Stillwell, who was a PA and then wound up being the script coordinator. And then Lolita Faggio had that job for years after that. But he came in 3rd season, and he was all gung-ho, and he had been a fan, and he pitched the story for this. And then later on, he told me all this, and that's what the core of it was for the companion. And then he has since done a book. I'll plug. He did a self-published book about the making of yesterday's Enterprise. Oh, because it was the first time, and I know people love the Measure of the Man, and it was the landmark show, and that was 2nd season. It was like Q Who was the first Borg show. So there were like stand-up moments, but in the day, I will say this: I was there in front of my TV the week this aired. And my jaw hit the floor, and you were a fan, and you were rooting for the show, and it was like, it felt like it was okay. It's creaking, and it's getting there, and it's getting, the stars were starting to be, fan favorites. But the week this was in Sweeps Week of 1990 in February, I guess. You're right. And this aired, and the first thought on my mind when it was finally done was, oh my God, they have finally equaled the original series movies.
Yeah, it really did feel like that in scope. This massive story with all the elements of emotion and exploring a character that left us. That Denise I've met Denise several times. Obviously Census interviewed her a couple of different times, and her performance in this is awesome. That last scene with her and Picard in particular, but. Let's at least we'll touch the bones of the story. We talked about it. So great first sequence. Worf hanging out, and Guinan coming over and saying, "Here, try this out." And what is she? Prune juice.
Warrior's drink.
Yeah, it's like just that's the beauty of great writing. It's like she could have get like here's Jack Daniels or something. Like she could have been giving him like something, but it's prune juice, the stuff that your grandmother drinks. You know what I mean? And he's all over it, which is the kind of the beginning, a continuation of Worf's love of weird food. Like he always eats like. Mm-hmm. When Riker would with the weird eggs and he's like, it's fantastic. Or when he and Geordi are in the Replimant on DS9 and he's like, this is so great. And Geordi's like, oh, it tastes like liquid polymer, you know? And so, yeah, Worf's stomach is cast iron. I just absolutely love that.
Well, the thing is, this episode has several of these, but there's a new phenomenon. I don't have a name for it yet, but there's a whole generation, and it's amazing, of kids. I'll say kids, fans of any stripe, but people who came to the show who love Lower Decks.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this pop up online in comments. People will say, or like it'll be a watch night of some group and people are mass streaming, commenting.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, if this was the show, somebody of that faction would go, oh my gosh, is this where the prune juice joke started? Because they know it as a meme, or they know it as a joke at a Lower Decks, or anything, and they're just now seeing it. It was like, oh look, or they'll say, oh look, it's the prune juice joke. Wow, that's old. And somebody else will say, this is where it started, and they're like,
know.
Like they just touched the Liberty Bell or something. It's like
it's like Marty McFly in Back to the Future when he says, "Oh, this is the episode where Ralph plays the man from space. I saw it as a rerun," and his future uncle says, "How could it be a rerun? It's brand new." So it's kind of the same concept.
Yeah,
it's a rerun.
Yeah, what's a rerun exactly? So yeah, we get thrown into the story. Things change. My favorite moment on the bridge is when Patrick is standing looking at the camera and you hear Michael in overdub say, coming into focus now, and Michael steps behind him because you could just see his shoulder and then he goes, whoop. I'm like, come on. Somebody went, all right, Michael, step to your left. Or his right in that case. I absolutely loved it.
One of my favorite little notes about that transition is you can hear the pitch shift in how Patrick is delivering his lines.
Right. Yeah. He's
like he's speaking more in an upper shift when he's our universe Captain Picard, and then all of a sudden it's like status lieutenant, like it's way down, and it's an interesting shift to audibly let us know.
Yeah. And it's one thing that kind of cracks me up watching shows now, where it's like watching the third season of Picard on the Titan / the Enterprise, how in Discovery or any of it, how dark everything is and how light everything used to be. And in this show, we went from kind of darkly lit, very cozy 10 forward to being, oh my God, it's super bright, like turning on the lights at the end of clicking the lights at the end of the night at a bar. And then on the bridge, it's like super dark. So I read, it wasn't your book, but it was the guy who did the Nitpicker's Guide, whose name is escaping me, who said, who didn't change the light bulbs on the bridge of the Enterprise in this episode? Because it's so dark, but now it's the norm. Everything in TV is just dark, dark, dark.
Yeah, because that's grittier and more dramatic and realistic.
Absolutely.
Yes, because you really want professional officers to be tripping and pushing the wrong buttons in a very tense situation.
I couldn't see, so I launched a torpedo. Whoops.
You want the fan modelers and cosplayers to hold off at least for a couple of years before they instantly show up with everything perfectly replicated.
Yeah, exactly. I do. So in this new universe, I do love how Riker and Picard just really oh boy, they really don't like each other. Riker's like, I could do better than this old guy. They're arguing at every turn, which I just think that's not our guys. They love each other, but obviously all the while Guinan has her super spider sense, which is letting her know that things are not right. And her interactions with Picard in this, saying, I can't prove it to you, but I'm right. And if you trust me, like I think you do, you'll know that I'm right and you'll just do it. And he's like, I got nothing. And then he does, because I love the air of the mystery of it's a different time period and whatever it is. And there's not a lot of his history with Guinan that's canonical, except what we see in season 2 of Picard, I guess. But their relation, and then obviously what we see in Time's Arrow. So their relationship goes way, 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 way back. But whatever it is that exists between them, he knows that she's right. So yeah, I thought that was terrific. I love the crew of the Enterprise C. We got Shooter McGavin, Chris McDonald, Shooter McGavin, obviously from before he was in Happy Gilmore, and the only version of Rachel Garrett that I recognize is portrayed by Trisha O'Neill in this episode.
Trisha O'Neill's great. Yeah, she read for Janeway later.
Oh my gosh, she would. I won't ever put Kate down, but there were a lot of great people that read for that role. I know Susan Gibney read for that role. Linda Hamilton read for that role. The Sarah Connor. Wow. But I don't recognize the weird portrayal. Funny story about that. I worked with a woman locally in radio when I was in sales who was related to her. So when she found out that I was a Trekker, she dropped that name on me like I wouldn't know what she was talking about. And I was like, ma'am, you're talking to the wrong guy. I know. She said, oh, I had a relative who was the original Janeway on Star Trek Voyager. I said, oh, you're related to Genevieve Bujold? And her eyes just popped open. I don't think most people think to know a fact like that, but
well, now they should know because it's all that footage is on YouTube.
What is this? The 70s?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not hidden. So, but anyway, I've been doing the talking, guys. Walk me through some of the other stuff that you loved about this episode, Larry.
It was odd, and again, I wasn't like dialed in big time, but a little bit later, soon knew that Michael inherited Guinan. Guinan was a second season creation, right? Mm-hmm. And they'd always kept her but they kind of kept going with the enigma. Like they were in no hurry to give you a fleshed out background on Guinan. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even have a name. The Elarians, they just called her. I'm a listener, and they would like capitalize listener. Right. And you didn't know was she a human that had been raised by aliens? What was the deal? Because Whoopi wasn't going to wear makeup, or they weren't going to make Whoopi wear makeup and prosthetic and all that. So
right, but she did have a great hat.
Oh yeah, she had great hats for that great head too. Yeah, but they never gave you the name Elarian until the Generations movie, and it was kind of like by then it was like, and that told you a lot of hardcore stuff about her. But these early years, it was just like they were very careful to throw one enigma at you at a time. And this was kind of like Q Who was a big one because you knew she knew Q, and they never did get back to what was the thing between her people. People riffed on that for ages. Like, what was all that about? Well, they're doing like corny superhero evil stuff after. Yeah. But this was an episode. This was a big episode for because the whole thing pivots on about his, like you said, his trust of her. And so we get the idea that it goes further back, but they would talk around all these hardcore facts. They would talk around them for years, right? If you watch Next Generation now, not waiting on the next week to fill in more, if you go back and look at it, notice how everything about Guinan nothing is tied down, but she's just woo, and this is the wooiest of all so far.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe even of the whole series until you get to Generation.
I think that would be about right, because even in Time Zero, it's a little bit more grounded because she's drawing on past experience, right? And we're well aware of what's going on because we see both ends.
And they tie her down to being in San Francisco in the 1890s, and
playing it right back again. So I will touch on the thing that it's the very last shot of the show. So obviously, as you would expect, we go through and everything ends up okay, and time is restored to normal, but we get a great very last scene, which is, and I just thought this was really weird for a couple of different reasons, but Guinan is, everything goes back to normal, and she calls in Picard and she says, hey, is everything going okay up there? She says, yeah, everything's fine. How come? No reason. And then she waves over one of her servers who brings a tray to a drink that she sits down in front of Geordi. And the famous bit is Geordi is wearing the incorrect uniform that was featured throughout the series with the single collar and the change of the color in the cuffs. And I also noticed for the first time, because I own a uniform like that, I have a really nice one that I got from a vendor overseas that has 3 hooks in the back that hook the collar. It looked like his collar was undone. So I'm like, did he just like jump into this and like, he's coming back late from the bathroom or something. He's like, I got to get back in the wardrobe. But it was far enough away. And he just sits down and says, Geordi, tell me about Tashiar. great scene. I did also kind of think it's weird that in the time that it took Worf to run up to the bridge to be there for the, I'm assuming, yellow alert, I think it was at the beginning, and then it ends when she was sitting with Worf. It's still yellow alert, or it just got canceled. Geordi then has time to then be like, oh man, yellow alert's over. I have got to have a cocktail. And he runs to 10 forward and sits down with Guinan. I just thought that part of it in retrospect, I kind of thought was weird.
I had never thought about that, because what gets
Yeah.
me is we get all emotional. That's awesome. It's 9 decks. Those turbulence.
Yeah.
He took the express to 10 forward, I guess. But
Right.
and they passed, and then they passed each other in the tubes.
Yeah.
But
Or he just abused his sight-to-sight privileges.
yeah, what gets me is we get so wrapped up in the emo of it. It's like, well, if Picard hadn't trusted Guinan and just went on, or if everything had failed and worked, then what was? It's like the Prime line had to be reset by what they did in their dimension. Anyway,
Right.
I it's like the action all happens out of Prime, and if he hadn't done that, then
Our timeline would no longer exist.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Or what we talk about multiple parallels, which was
Right.
I guess or multiple wharfs, as my wife used to call it. It's like
Multi-wharf.
one of those timeline. Anyway, it's just we get so wrapped up in the emotion of this without realizing that 99% of it is all these decisions are being made apart from the Prime line, and that the two cards are helping each other, which is kind of a thing that comes back in a different way in All Good Things in the finale.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, people across
Yeah.
times helping each other without just because of trust. So I don't know.
Trust. It's all
The amazing
about
thing is
trust.
we're sitting here and made such an impact. I mean, at the end of the line, at the end of Next Generation, there were fan polls, and we did a poll in the Communicator. And for years, people would say Yesterday's Enterprise was their favorite episode of the best, or their favorite. And then All Good Things, kind of, it's a two-parter, and they got, and then The Inner Light kind of came in there as the quiet one. But this was, ranked at the time as the number 1 or top 3 episodes of the thing. And it came in the 3rd season that was so troubled. And all of that is amazing when you think of, and I it's all here in the notes and people can read it. But when you think
Right.
about how this was a cobbled together show, Eric got to pitch this, but he had it was gonna, it was gonna be Surak, and it was gonna be the Guardian of Forever was the timepiece, and Michael wanted to back off. They still didn't want to jump into original series stuff, which is hysterical because this planted the seed to have Mark Leonard on Sarek just a few weeks later.
Right. Yeah. They were, look what we can do now.
This is
And
how fast things were
yeah.
changing and in flux. But the other thing was how it was a shit show because Guinan is such a central part, and they
Right.
were always beholden to Whoopi's schedule.
Right.
And they were supposed to film this in January, but her schedule shifted, so they had to move it up a month, which meant they needed the script earlier, which meant it was so complicated, and a lot of people didn't have a lot of faith in it. But they had to finish the script, and it became this famous, cluster over Thanksgiving where all the writers basically, Michael gave everybody an act, and they went home, and that's why you have 4 names on the writers' credits.
Oh my gosh!
But
yeah.
he was the 5th act, but he didn't put his name on because you could only do 4 names on a script
Right.
according to the guild. And he was the showrunner, so he took his name off and let the rest of them have it. But everybody thought this was a doomed, crazy, rushed, Mishigosh goofball show. It was just wacky doodle, and the idea that it came together from these parts and put together, and then people were like having a headache. Anyway, the fact that it became like the classic show is just incredible.
You've just named the episode. I'm trying to type it now. Goofball. You said Mishigas, which it'll autocorrect me. Mishigas crazy show. And this one got a sequel, which all alternate dimension episodes generally don't. You know what I mean? This got a sequel of sorts in season 5, at the end of season 4, season 5.
That was with Sela coming back from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, don't spoil. Well, I would say don't spoil it, but we've long talked about that show a long time ago.
And the ship nerds, the ship pornistas, get the Enterprise C in this.
Yeah, one of my favorite designs.
And it's one of the I know I mention this all the time, but Star Trek Online actually did a follow-up to this where this was the first canon ship that you got to fly for real. So
Oh, okay.
you actually
Oh.
got to pilot the Enterprise C.
It
So
does. Yeah.
they had a timeline shift where like the C went forward in the future, and then you had to save it for the
It does
future. So it's a
absolutely
whole
have.
extra bit,
Yeah.
but it was
It
cool.
has one of the absolutely laziest bridge redressings and all. But again, there's only so much money to go around. But it's like they took the battle, and it's weird. I did make a note that at the end, when Tasha signs on to go back with him into the rift, she sits down at tactical, and it's like this. Okay. The chair was nowhere close because they took the consoles from the battle bridge, and the whole thing is the battle bridge was actually the Enterprise A bridge from the movies, I think. Yeah. And so it's the most cobbled together. They have the Monster Maroons on there, which every costumer loves the Monster Maroon, the film uniforms. But
no,
by this point, no shirt, no belt. And then also
Enlisted didn't have insignia either.
Oh my God. Well, I noted for the entirety of the episode.
That's the year's changes, see?
Yeah. For the entirety of the episode, Shooter McGavin, aka Lieutenant Handsome, as I call him, he didn't have a badge until he needed to use it like a comm badge, which was the first time that badge was used in that fashion. Mm-hmm. He also has I think he has the wrong phaser, because he has the Star Trek II phaser like magneted to his hip. He has no belt, but it's like stuck there like they did in the old show, Velcro or Good Thoughts. The costumiers were just crazy in this. I loved it, but it just all absolutely worked out.
Well, you can see it's whenever they do, it's amazing, because sometimes when it's a premiere or finale and they want to do something big. Like Q-Who was insane that they did the Borg in the middle of the year, because they were scrambling around to come up with the corridor and the set. I mean, that's a lot. That's not just spending money. It's spending the time and spending the brain power to come up with this. You're wanting to have these Borg be huge, and they were running around, gluing model ship parts. I did a feature on the old original StarTrek.com years ago, and we had pieces of things, and they were making, but it was kind of that way here too. Not so much they built the Borg cube for Q-Who, but this one was they had to build the same. Greg Jean, late great Greg Jean, turns out this Enterprise C in like insane time and builds a whole model, they did a whole thing.
Right. Built a model and distressed it with everything.
The reason that Geordi is so, the famous cuff errors, I just get it, that they're like scrambling around. Now what? Okay. And the way they had to shoot it, and okay, everybody's got their sidearms, but no, because the only normal, they just had the front and the end.
Right.
The opening in the back were the only thing normal. Right. And so it's almost like in the transitions is when you get screwed up. And then having the Monster Maroons with a crew that's not used to dealing with them.
Right.
It invites all kinds of crazy, because you're out of your normal routine for one show.
Yeah, so many moving parts. All right, let's start to wrap this up. We always like to give a rating. This one, I wouldn't even know why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10. It was a 9 out of 10 for me, because it was top shelf. It gave Tasha a proper end, though it was not the end, but it felt like an end. It was like I said, as opposed to her kind of lame one in real life back in season 1, where Armis just goes and she gets a goober on her face and she's dead. It was just, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It did have the time travel alternate history tropes, which is unavoidable. And with the context, Larry, that you're providing of how it was like, okay, everybody take an act home over Thanksgiving, have some turkey and write something, and come back on Monday and we'll see what we got. That sounds horrible.
No. They came into the office over Thanksgiving.
Oh my God. Oh,
yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Even more nuts.
I think I think they had Thanksgiving Day off, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday they were all in working together.
What a fun Black Friday.
Yeah.
Trying to write some Star Trek, which is a dream job to any of us, but when it's a job, and it's work and it's pressure. So without a doubt. But they did it all. They pulled it off. I will note, because you were talking about ratings, for our 100th episode, which was back in 2023, we did this was my partner Todd's idea. We did a bracketology, like a March Madness. And this was selected. I think I picked the TNG episodes, like, here's my top 5 or 10, and they all competed with each other. This was one of mine. It did lose out in round 2 to the Enterprise 2-parter In a Mirror Darkly, because we had a panel of 5 and everybody got to vote. So I disagree.
All time shows, not next gen. Okay.
It was all time up to that point. Time. Yep. It was all time. Yeah. So I don't necessarily, I would love to have seen it gone further, but it was up against DS9, Voyager, Lower Decks, everything else. So yeah, tough competition, but it's without a doubt one of the finest. All right, Larry, how would you rate this out of 10?
I never give 10s on any. I don't give 10s on anything. for any,
I agree.
rate your experience at our bank or our drugstore.
Yeah,
But
right.
you have to give this one a 10. Even, I know, apparently the cuff thing really got to you.
Oh my God, it got to me
But
in
I'm gonna
1990.
overlook it.
I couldn't deal with it. It's been 35 years. I can't deal with it.
Yeah. No, this is just an amazing episode. And maybe I'm swayed by remembering at the time, just like people now watch Best of Both Worlds and he says Mr. Worthfire, and it's like, okay, next episode. I'm sorry, if you were there, that was just like a shock. It was just, it was a thunderclap. And that's what this episode was.
Right.
And
Thunderclap.
and then they all, and then very quickly they got the general quality was going up and up and up all the time.
Right. It was just an upward trend. They were on
But
a rocket up.
This was just like, oh my God. It was a stop, look, and listen moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Peter, what do you think?
I mean, I'm probably gonna have to give this one a 10 too.
Oh no, the pressure. All right, I revised. It's 10 for me as well.
Just because it's like, this is one of my favorite episodes, period. Just, there's so much going on with it, and I like having two Enterprises in the same shot. I like all the interactions between the different crews. Garrett is a great character, even though she's not like in tons and tons of it.
But she delivers.
Yeah.
24 hours.
She has a presence.
Might as well be 24 years. She's just like, get that. Or you'll explain now, Commander, and she's half dead.
She's one of those characters. If you've ever seen, if you've ever played Mass Effect, she always reminds me a little bit of Garrus, which is a similar.
Garrett. That's weird.
Yeah. When we talked about the movie that shall not be named, I mentioned that Garrett has a stick that would rival Garrus in terms of how stiff she is about certain things. But she's a great, interesting character, and I'd love to see more of that character, but particularly on the Enterprise. But probably not gonna get it.
Yeah. Oh well, it would be nice, but yeah. Oh my gosh. I do like in my notes that Jonathan Frakes, who we talked to not that long ago on the show, was quoted as saying, "To this day, I do not understand yesterday's Enterprise. I do not know what the fuck happened in that episode. I'm still trying to understand it, but I liked the look." That is from Captain's Log Unauthorized Voyages. Oh, I love Frakes. I look forward to seeing him again on the cruise. He is a character. And Larry,
I want to know what date that, I think since he said that, I'd like to know what date that was, that interview quote was from. Because I'm thinking since then, I think he's figured it out. But
okay. By the way, Frakes, Larry has turned the gauntlet down. Have you figured it out? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah,
here's another one more here. Give some credit on this show to David Carson, the British director who directed this. Did such a bang up job. They let him direct the Emissary 2-part pilot for DS9, where he did such a bang up job that they gave him Generations to direct. So,
right. Oh gosh, I did not make that connection. Yeah. We have a couple of comments from the socials, and then we will move along. Over on the Mission Log Discord, we had new user the Profanity say, "Yesterday's Enterprise is what finally hooked me into watching Star Trek regularly at the age of 10. Youngin'. I watched my VHS copy so many times the tape broke because I was hitting rewind, play, rinse, repeat so much to memorize the whole thing by heart." I appreciate that. Good deal.
There you go.
And here's a quote from Kurt Krug, who is my friend, who is our Patreon, who is my, I call him my agent because he introduces me to so many of these great people. Denise Crosby said she had to have her character die in order to get the best episodes. And that's from an interview that he did with her because he's a journalist.
That's another layer of the whole thing about how she went, oops, like, I regret leaving the show.
Yeah.
But how do I get back? How do I claw back a little bit of that?
But she came back and made it good.
Yeah.
You're right. If this was the genesis of the show achieving its destiny, she was there. It was her.
Then you got Sela, and then
yeah. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Well, cool. All right. Well, we're still running along with Next Generation. Larry, thanks for hanging in with us. We're going to end TNG now by talking about the last crop of episodes. And Larry, the way this works is that I'll generally read the description, or I'll read the particulars. I'll read a description, and we'll just round robin through and just give your thoughts on how you felt about the episode. And at the very end, we pick a favorite and a least favorite from this batch. So. Okay. Pretty simple. But I'll get us rolling. Episode 21 of the season. And this was a quick sidebar. What I was doing in this time of my life. This was the end of my senior year of high school, which I probably mentioned time and again. So this was like a crazy time of life for me anyway. But TNG started my first year of junior high and ended at my last year of high school. So it was so much of
Yeah.
life contained within this show for me.
A real bracket.
I
That
was 2.
he was 2. He's a baby. We don't need Larry. Yeah, Larry's going to reach across from California and slap you.
No. Better to have
Because
you
you're-
here with us, Peter. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! But yeah,
I wish I
this
could
was-
start a few 2-year-olds now on Star Trek. Yeah.
we gotta continue to indoctrinate the youth. We just got to keep working on it. But anyway, this was very special for me, and of course, I if I'm not mistaken, the weekend that All Good Things aired was the weekend of my high school graduation. Like I did that, all the parties and stuff, and still somehow managed to watch this episode. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. All right, let's get it going. Episode 21 is Firstborn. Jonathan West handling the directing. The story from Mark Calfed, I don't recognize his name, Calfed. Teleplay by Renee Echeverria. April 25th of 1994. Worf attempts to convince his son Alexander to embrace his warrior heritage. Guest star James Sloyan as Kimtar. Quick sidebar. If you're a member of our Patreon, just this morning as we're recording this, because we recorded it last night, my wife and I, Larry, this will crack you up because you were around back in those days, we watched Xanadu, the Olivia Newton-John film, of which James Sloyan plays a role in it as the record company executive. That's the most ridiculous film I've ever seen, and his role was one of the most grounded ones.
I'm now, I don't know the actor. I mean, I see what he did in Star Trek. Now I got to see him without makeup on because he kept playing aliens. So,
Yeah, you're right, because he was, and I mentioned this commentary, he was Admiral Jirac in The Defector, which is one of my favorites. And yes, then he was in this, and then yes, he was in Xanadu. So my God, that movie's so ridiculous. But anyway, all right, thoughts on the episode, Larry, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't expect the Xanadu reference here.
Well, I didn't think that until when I was scrolling through, I'm like, James Sloyan, he was Simpson, who ran the record company, who was the bad guy.
Well, Gene Kelly never got into Star Trek.
Oh my gosh, Olivia Newton-John, or the poor guy,
Olivia Newton-John, yeah,
and the poor guy Michael Beck, who was, I remember him from The Warriors more fondly than I do from this.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencastr. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. Provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencastr because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencastr has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencastr? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. So if you're interested in making an easy, high-quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
So here's the interesting thing, and I had this in the companion. So part of this is, I don't know if this is repetitive or what, but the amazing thing about this, so this Calfeb was another person out there in the hinterlands who would pitch. Michael Piller again he was so desperate third season that he came up with this. Even though everybody said no, we'll have crazy people who aren't used to the system
Riding in the
how are you
streets.
gonna? Yeah, and he was like,
Right.
"Can we do a release form?" And so eventually, years later, and Michael was gone, people still sued, even though they'd signed a release form, because that's the way people don't get it. That 8 other people might have the same idea they did,
Right.
kind of a thing. But this was the Calfeb was one of those ideas that came in, and then Renee, was on staff and took it to script. And the original premise was, this is how these work. So the original premise was there was a Romulan ship with Federation markings from a supposedly peaceful future, but it was a time travel Trojan horse. They were coming back. It was Romulans, and there was a future Riker. They were a hoax and all that. But this thing about having a fix from the future hung on, and the big part of that. So that's what is, that's what the thing is. But originally, the young boy actor who played Alexander that they wound up with, was kind of a holy hell. And they were seriously thinking about, instead of sending Alexander back to himself, to actually have him stay adult.
Oh, okay. Well, this was the character's last appearance in the show. Do we see him again?
As a kid, they were thinking about leaving him as an adult, but Jerry Taylor said, I am not going to do that to a child. I don't care who the actor is. I'm not going to do it. So Michael and the guys were all
Andy
saying
from Family Ties.
Yeah. So that was kind of like a mini internally controversial.
Interesting.
Bit. Yeah.
Wow.
So and this is and the reason that Patrick is not in this very much. He has like one scene.
Right.
The week they shot this was the week that he hosted Saturday Night Live.
Oh, which I'm a huge SNL fan. I know that is an all-encompassing deal. When someone works SNL, they're there for the entire week, working every day. So you don't do SNL and then something else. You just do SNL. Yeah.
And originally, so again, I don't know how much this is repetitive, but just for folks that hadn't seen The Companion, originally, in the climax of rescuing Alexander from Kimtar, they were going to have Susie Plaxton play Kalar and rescue him, but she didn't. She was busy and couldn't make the timing work.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And because I love Susie Plaxton. I would have loved to have seen her again.
That photo in to make up for it.
Yeah. We did end up seeing her playing Lady Q in Voyager, which was again a delicious role. But would love to see her again. So, Peter, thoughts for you? How do you feel about the episode?
I thought this was an interesting episode. It's one where we get another one where we get some more Klingon culture. My family constantly references this whole ceremony that they have with fighting with the bells on the ballots and stuff.
At the Ren Fair of
we always joke. It's like, if we need another like holiday to celebrate as a family, let's do the Day of Honor just for shits and giggles.
Right.
So there's a soft spot in my heart for that part of the episode just because it's funny. There's also just like the whole Alexander is like two parts trying to like impress his father and one part trying like, I want to be my own thing and listen to what my mother said. And so you have him like actually hurt the guy who's pretending to be Molar. And
background Worf's like,
Worf was like, good job, son. And Alexander's like, yes. And the actor's like, what the hell?
Yeah. What the hell, bro? Yeah, exactly.
Like there's some really funny bits in that whole thing. And then I thought it was interesting how we bring in the Dura sisters, who I don't know if that was part of the reason on why they were also then brought into Generations, because it was like, oh, here's these villains that we brought back for a little bit, and hey, segue. But it was interesting how
it was the other way. I think that was a setup to have them.
Oh, so kind of hey, they still exist. So when you see them, it's not as big of a deal. I guess.
They had refresh people on them. Yeah,
they had been on DS9, and this was the episode where they got Armin in as well to have the basically Zoom call with Riker, didn't he?
Yes.
Was that this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Which was quite funny.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff about this episode that's just really funny to me.
It's of its time, not of its time in 1994, but of its time in what was going on elsewhere.
Yeah. In universe of its time, there's a lot of connecting bits, which is just, I'm a sucker for interconnected, a living universe, as it were. And this is an episode that does that really, really well.
Yeah.
And the time travel bit where Alexander's trying to save Worf from getting murked on the floor of the High Council it's interesting, even though it's only revealed very close to the end.
Yeah, it's just his dialogue. There's not any actual time traveling shenanigans happening.
And then there's not like an exact explanation of what happens to Elder Alexander. It's like he went home.
Yeah, he went to a farm upstate.
What does that mean? Did he like go back to the future and pull a Marty McFly? Now he has a happier life, or like
Yeah, he got in.
Did he
got in
go
his
back to
little
the
DeLorean.
future? Now he
got his-
doesn't exist anymore. Did he
Oh,
fade
wait.
off the photograph? I don't know.
I'm Back to the Future, and I'm not actually here. Yeah, you're right. That's kind of like what happened to him. I fade off the photograph. Oh, a lot of Back to the Future interplay here. So yeah, yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. Again, you're right. Now I'm stuck in Xanadu, so I don't know what else to say.
I don't know if you're ever going to get out the way this is
Oh my
going.
God! Now I might have to change the name of the episode again. We'll see what happens. All right, we'll move on. Episode 22 is Bloodlines. Les Landau handling the directing. Script by Nick Sagan. Now Nick Sagan, obviously, he's son or grandson of Carl Sagan.
Son.
And he directed an episode prior to this, or did he direct after? I seem to remember him more directing than writing, or maybe I've got that backwards.
I don't know. You put me on the spot here. I don't know that he got to direct anything, but he was a staffer. He was on staff.
He was a staffer.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I was thinking of. Anyway, this is from May of '94. Damon Bach guest star Lee Ehrenberg, who we got to chat with quite a while back. We did an interview with him here on the show. Peter and I did. So very interesting guy.
One, but yeah.
Yes. You were not there for that one? Was I mistaken? Oh, well, shucks, sorry. Returns to it was a long time ago. Returns to exact revenge on Picard by trying to kill the son that Picard never knew he had. He's not seeing all my air quotes. Yeah, this was our turn at soap opera-ing. I got the feeling without it. My son, it just very much was Days of Our Lives. And I had this old girlfriend and she never told me she had a baby and blah, 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 with the Star Trek turn at the end. So, Peter, you go first this time.
I'm not entirely sure what I think of this episode. I find it as I said, I love things that tie into the universe and make things connect. So I like that this ties back to, I think it was season 2 with the Stargazer.
Season one. The battle.
Early, yeah.
Yeah, the battle. It's like I see the uniform, I just can't remember which year.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we had a tie back all the way to season 1 in season 7.
Yeah.
So I like that, but it's not one of those stories that I felt needed a follow-up.
Yeah. Unnecessary sequels.
To be
they
fair,
do the movies all
they
the time.
follow up on it in a decent way. Like we get later on, Damon Bach has been stripped of his daemonship and has been in jail, and he gets out and then deceives people and all this. And we also eventually get kind of a background reference to this isn't the Ferengi military. Like there's still Prophet and stuff that from Deep Space Nine, and so there's still some of that's tied in.
Yeah,
Ferengi military to
so
contextualize the character, even though we saw him in season 1.
Right.
But like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting how he like does this whole genetic manipulation to be like, I killed your son, even though he's not. But I'm just need to have vengeance on you somehow because I killed jackass.
Some dude. So feel bad about it. Yeah, it was basically. No, Larry, what do you think?
Well, you're wondering why they didn't say. So this is funny. So the big picture here is not just they're writing shows. You talked about it early on. This is the only series, or the first series that you're covering. But this is the only series in all of Star Trek that got a movie and knew it.
Yep.
Right.
While they were filming the series. Like the original series they just were dead. And this is the only time a Star Trek series got a movie and the cast knew it and they were exhausted. And so their whole attitude and mindset and the crew and the writers and everybody, it was a whole different dimension than the sadness or the triumph or whatever of getting canceled or getting to end yourself. They got to, DS9 went out. I mean, the Berman shows all had an ending finale.
Right.
Put to them. This one, they had the finale was almost a second thought because they had a movie, and of course, ironically, the finale winds up being as good or better than the movie.
Much
but
better.
At the time, these last few episodes they're like, come on, hurry up, get it done, and all these last episodes can't mess up what's happening in the movie that's been written for 2 years.
So
and
no
is about
stakes.
to be filmed.
Yeah.
So it was weird. They were like, you would think there would be a lot of, 8 years is a lot of time to be writing stories. And there was a fatigue factor, but also they were boxed in by what they couldn't do that wouldn't mess up the movie. And Jerry Taylor was so desperate for stories here It's like she's running around looking for a relief pitcher. The idea for this came from Patrick. They went down to stage and asked all the cast and said, is there anything that you think we've never followed up on? And I mean, everybody, and the only one that came up with something or something they decided was Patrick is like going, well, there was that story with that Bach guy and my, wanting to take revenge. Was he done? Is there something? So that's where the idea came from.
That's so crazy. It's like, it's just, all right, everybody, write something down on a piece of paper and a hat, and we're going to put them together on a board. And Picard, it just turns into Mad Libs. Picard goes to the Ferengi, and that's, I had no, so is that in your book? Am I just forgetting, or are you just is this new information?
I think it's in the book. I think it's in the book.
Okay.
But
all right.
The other wacky thing is that, Patrick had his son Daniel on the Inner Light.
Right.
And so in this, that it's kind of funny, the things that went in and out and how they would deal with it, and whether there was one moment where both Bach and Jason are going to be are killed off.
Oh,
at the end for 5 seconds. That was an idea.
Sure.
But originally, so Renee is writing this one again, and his original name was Christoph for the boy, the Nick Sagan's one. Then Renee did a late polish on it, and he made the son Daniel. And then Patrick said, "Can we not have it be Daniel because that's my real son's name?" And so that's where Jason came from.
Gotcha.
Anyway, it's kind of, they originally had a scene where Jason Picard at the end talk that they wish that they were really kin.
Yeah.
They went away, and they were talking about maybe they need to set Picard up for being more depressed when things happen in generations, and he has to talk about losing. So again, it was like they were, everything was overshadowed right now. All these episodes, they're overshadowed by what they can and can't do for the movie.
That makes sense.
Because of the movie.
Quick aside before we move on to the next one. I was watching this with my mother at the time it aired, and at the end where Jason's getting ready to beam back down to his arguably kind of crappy life on the planet, I'm going to go back and steal some more and climb cliffs and whatever. Picard says, "Well, I've got something to give you," and he hands. Yeah, he said he goes to hand him the flute, and my mom says, "Here's a 10 spot for gas." Which I thought was a great line. So things that you remember 30 years later, I just thought, that's, you know what? Comedy's all about timing. Nailed it. All right. Well, of this batch, and there's
one more wacky thing.
Yes,
so that disease he supposedly has.
Oh yeah, I know the story.
You know, Trent Reznor, he named it Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails.
I do remember. I remember that from your book.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, okay. Let's move on. I'm just
all right. So not at all. So unlike the last, Peter, was it the last two batches we did where we were like, can we find a good episode in here? We only have one, in my opinion, real stinker in this batch, and that would be number 23, Emergence. Cliff Bowl doing the directing, and it always blows my mind when you have like the top dudes writing the story in the episodes. Like, what? But this is Braga and Minosky doing the story and the teleplay respectively. From May of '94, the Enterprise becomes an emergent intelligence. Why not? And it is discovered the ship is creating a new life form via the holodeck characters. Larry, you're about ready to jump out of your skin. You got something to say? Hit me with it.
Oh no, it's just that again, the mindset of things are ending.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do one more holodeck story, and they thought about doing one more Dixon Hill, but they thought, oh my God, we've done 3. Let's do whack. And see, and Joe Minosky is the weird shit guy who would come up with these incredible ideas, and sometimes they could make them work in a 60-minute, $1.5 million budget, and sometimes they could not get even the idea corralled. And so they basically this is what if the holodeck became alive, and so it's like piece. Right. You get the plot. So that was him trying to.
It's better than Masks.
Take one of those. Yeah. Well, see, Masks was another wacky, but then you get some of the other, the Inner Light, or not Inner Light, but some of the other shows that they tried to wrap their hand, and some that never got made. The Q Olympics was a show that never.
Oh
got
my
made.
God! I remember reading about that in your
That
book.
was going to be everybody was going to be doubled, and Q was going to double everybody, and it was crazy. And they tried for 3 or 4 years to get that to work, and they never.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
So you look at Masks, and you look at this one, and you go, okay, these are the ones that didn't hit, but then he's got his name on lots of.
Yeah, he's got some pretty good ones, but this one's
Yeah.
definitely one of those.
But see, that's what you talk. That is literally the definition of swinging for the fences.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hit the home run. Sometimes you totally crap out.
Sometimes you get you get Q-Who, and sometimes you get this. But yeah, you're right. You're in the game. But yeah, just a lot of weird stuff in this. The Orient Express with the knight and knight's armor and the gangster guys, and we're going to Vertiform City, and here's the gold brick, and it was just like, what the hell's going on?
Now I was there. I've got some pictures of Marina being made up in the trailer. This was when I was working on the companion, and I was here.
Okay.
At the lot, and I went over and watched the whole thing of the gold brick and the wall on the lot and filming. I went over and watched them film that. I mean, it's like nothing, but just some moments. And I was in the trailer and have pictures of Marina getting made up right before she went over to film that. So it was kind of that way.
Yeah,
but the guy, awesome. The man in the gray flannel suit.
Yeah,
that is Dennis Tracy, who is Patrick's stand-in for almost
all
of the show. Yeah, the other thing is it's getting down to the end, and they're starting to pull things like giving extras lines and doing little in-house family things because the show is wrapping up. So
I like it. Peter, any other thoughts?
This was an episode that I felt needed a follow-up.
Okay.
Because as weird as it is to say, because the Enterprise 1 is an emergent intelligence, that felt like that could have been addressed at a later point. It's like it had a neural network. What happened to it? Oh, well, it stopped because it reproduced. That feels like that might need to be talked about later, especially since the Enterprise is resurrected in Picard season 3.
Oh, you're right. Maybe it's going to come back. Hey,
so like that might be something that's kind of important.
It comes back because I thought it was from sabbatical. Yeah,
I thought it was kind of funny how
Jean-Luc.
I thought it was funny how we had like the Enterprise. We always talk about how the Enterprise is a character, and then it's like here the Enterprise is now a sentient character.
Right. And
Discovery took that and did its own thing with it, but this was like, this is where that idea has its seminal form. And so I think that this could have been an interesting thing to either go on of like, let's revisit the Enterprise as an intelligence, or suddenly there is the son of Enterprise flying around and there's a sentient galaxy class just somewhere in the galaxy.
Oh, son of Enterprise. I like it.
It would probably be a horrible story, but I think it would be interesting to revisit.
Okay, new episode title, Son of Enterprise. It's a horrible story.
One cool thing about this is they were going to build the railroad car from scratch, the interior, and then to save money, they went over and somebody had a connection and they rented the same railroad car in the interior used in Bram Stoker, Coppola's Dracula.
Oh, no way. Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's kind of neat.
I love it. All right. Okay. So we go from that, which Peter liked more than anyone I've ever talked to. So you know what? I'm impressed. But now we move on to just a whiz-bang killer episode. And this touches DS9 perfectly. It's directed by Patrick. So episode 24 is Preemptive Strike. Patrick doing the directing. Naren Shankar with the story. Renee is doing the teleplay. So you've got top talent all across the board, and it shows. From May of 94, now Lieutenant Rowe is back on the Enterprise. She's graduated from advanced tactical training, and Picard sends her to lure Maquis terrorists into a trap. They always have weird guest star information. Guest star Richard Poe is Gulliver. I know who he is, but it's not like guest starring Mel Gibson as Gulliver. I don't know why they put that note in there, but I know who he was because I remember from DS9. Fantastic episode. Talking about, like at the end of any show, you're going to wrap up people's storyline. We haven't seen Rose since the beginning of season 6 when they were all shrunken into little like their preteen years.
Oh,
I don't
Rascals.
feel,
Yeah,
yeah, the
Rascals.
Rascals. I feel like we didn't see her after that. And she had lots of stories in the comics, which are not, which Michael Jan Friedman is someone we've interviewed. Those are not canonical, so it doesn't really matter. But she's been gone and she's back. And this was after she was, as of course Larry knows, was offered the role of the, what became Major Kira on DS9 and turned it down.
They just wanted to move Ro to DS9.
Yeah, exactly. And they, in a lot of ways, they did, because there could have been a lot of great stories out of Ro after she defects to the Maquis, which is how this episode ends. I absolutely love this episode. Definitely a highlight. I don't know if there's rankings where I'd rank it, but within the context of the season, I would put this in a top five, definitely probably a top 5 or 10, because I just think this is it's great character development. It sets the stage for what we see in the episode in Picard season 3 when she comes back and they're staring each other down and kind of they're reopening old wounds, and it's all about this episode. So I just thought it was absolutely exceptional.
Of course, for 30 years that wasn't a factor. I
Right.
mean, we didn't know that, we'd ever see her after she turned down DS9. We didn't know we'd ever, and had the attitude of, I'm trying to do films. And then she was on Galactica. So it was
God.
like,
we talk Galactica on another one of our shows. Peter and I do on one of our Patreon shows. I am just such a massive fan of Ron's Galactica. It's one of the finest shows I've ever seen. And her role was cutting glass so good. It was just incredible.
But anyway, yeah, it's funny how now up until like 2-3 years ago, we would never look at preemptive. We would look at it as on its own merits. Now we will forever look at it as the setup show for the conflict in Picard season 3. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's how things evolve and change, and thank good they did. But the whole thing about her leaving the show and leaving TV, and Jerry Taylor again. They said they were also trying to wrap things up, right?
Right.
And they were trying to go back and they wanted to wrap up the Ro because it had started off so strongly and with Picard, and they were like, "Hey, her agent said stop calling us." And so Jerry got on the phone and said, "Look, we had this great story. The show's ending. We're going to the movie," and they got her to say yes. So,
right,
yeah,
and we ended up great with this. Peter, your thoughts?
Ro is one of my favorite characters, and so I really enjoy pretty much every episode she's in. And this is one of the really good ones because it really focuses on her as a character. It's like everybody else is in it, but Ro is kind of the focal point. She's the POV for the episode, and so we get to see an interesting bit where like the past of her not really. Like where we first see her, where she's like a bit of a rebel, and she's like Picard has to pull her out of a penal colony, and all of this stuff. And so we kind of see all of those character elements that we've seen throughout her appearances kind of rise to the surface throughout this episode. And then we finally get to in a way, she kind of reverts to I'm not going to listen to authority, but it's not in the same way that she did when she first is encountered in Ro, right? Because it's not a screw authority. I'm a rebel. I do my own thing. You guys can go pound sand. I don't care.
Right.
We see that this isn't like young rebellion. This isn't I just don't give a shit. It's I feel very strongly about this, and this is about people. And I think that the orders that are given to me are wrong. Not that I'm just like, meh. I think that the orders that are being given to me are intrinsically wrong. Right. And I have a duty to fight them.
My conscience, right.
To countermand these orders on my own and to mutiny against someone who is a role model. And you can see that really hurts her to do that. Yeah. And I think that that's very masterful writing in that way and just performance wise.
Right.
Where you see that this break between her and Picard really, really hurts her. And you can see it really, really wounds Picard as well.
Yeah,
he's a lot more angry about it than
so composed. Yeah.
That is when I was watching it again, it felt there was a little bit where it's like he might be a little overreacting to some of this, but at the same time you understand that he took it upon himself to make sure that he mentored her and got her through that penal part and got her back on her feet, and now she's throwing it back into his face, at least as how he perceives that.
Right.
And so it's just, there's a really, really good back and forth between these characters, and a really, really good thing from Ro's perspective. And just as a side note, I also really quite enjoy the end bit where you have the Riker, oh shit, in the shuttle.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is what's going on.
And it's really weird because the two of them hooked up once too. So it's like, okay, well, bye.
But you can also see Riker like accept her decision and be like, I don't agree with it, but I understand it.
Yeah.
And-
there was a lot of that. Somebody following their conscience, which is
which is a very different take on the Maquis than we see in Deep Space Nine,
right?
Because Sisko is just like,
well, yeah, his best friend, and he was like, yeah, you're dead to me now. And then later on with Eddington, he was like, nope, just gonna blow them all up, don't care.
Yeah, so it's just Picard kind of has a similar thing to Sisko, and then you have a very different reaction with Riker, and so I think that's a very nuanced take on the Maquis that TNG does, that then we don't see as it's mentioned in Deep Space Nine, but it's a good thing to keep in mind when we're leading into the rest of the Maquis conflict,
right,
in Deep Space Nine. So
absolutely.
And what's amazing to remember, and I was just looking at some other notes here, is the whole thing about the Maquis, which this is the first time. Well, this is the first time that, and of course, DS9 had Maquis show. All of that was to set up Voyager.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly.
It was only, and DS9 felt like, the Maquis were shoehorned in on them a little bit, but they took it and ran with it, and TNG was ending, and they only had this one shot at it. But like Admiral Nechayev and Gully Vec are supposed to be tied to the demilitarized zone, and they're on DS9. And if you notice the village here in this episode, look at the extras. There are Klingons, there's Vulcans, there's Native American-y looking.
Right, like from the Wesley's swan song in our last batch of episodes.
Yes, and all of that was meant to say, and that was also before. This was before Voyager was cast, and they wound up pulling back on what Chakotay was going to be.
Right,
they didn't go as overtly as the Wesley show had been.
Yeah, that was going to be my note, because Ro describes a revered instructor of hers at the academy, which I think I read in your book, well, that was supposed to be Chakotay, but in Voyager, they later retconned it so the timing doesn't quite fit, because he gives a date in an episode where he had left Starfleet 2 years before this episode took place, so it wouldn't have worked out. But I love Chakotay as a character, so I thought that would have been cool. But yeah, it's kind of like in Star Wars, where everybody's related and everybody knows everybody. In the whole weird wide galaxy, not everybody in Starfleet is going to be like, yes, I know so-and-so. It was like in Star Trek 2, where Terrell says, well, I've never even met Admiral Kirk. And you're like, what? Doesn't everybody know everybody?
What backwater were you raised on? I know.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody knows Kirk. He's a celebrity. All right. Well, we're going to move into the finale, which was obviously it aired as a single movie. It was split up subsequently in syndication. But for the purpose of circling back to pick a favorite and a least favorite, we're going to leave this out. So we're going to pick from outside of this when we pick a favorite and least favorite when we get to the end, so that we can.
Because otherwise, pretty much everyone would pick All Good Things.
Yeah, because All Good Things is great. But yes, All Good Things is episode 25 and 26, if you look at it that way. Winrich Colby doing the directing, Ron Moore and Brandon Braga, gentlemen scholars, writing this script. For May 23rd of 1994, Picard finds himself being transported by Q between 3 time periods to deal with the phenomenon that threatens to erase humanity from history. And again, originally shown as a 2-hour, but split up in syndication, which video on demand does not have the 1-parter, but if you watch it on Paramount Plus, they do. If you happen to, dear viewer, want to go ahead and watch it. And it's because when they split it up for syndication, there are trims and scenes dropped and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's no good.
The wild thing is that originally there were going to be 4 timelines.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were originally going to have the best of both worlds, because it was kind of it was kind of a TNG's greatest hits.
Yeah,
and I remember reading the behind the scenes there, and I was like, "How is that going to work?"
Yeah, right.
In your third hour,
hours. In your third hour.
That's what.
Exactly. Yeah. Now we're going to turn it into North and South. Be a mini series. So, Larry, this is being one of the seminal segments of Star Trek. Walk us through it. Tell us your experience and your thoughts.
Well, this was at the time when I was getting to interview everybody really intensely this was for the second edition. So I had a ton of notes on this and from all different angles. But the thing that's crazy now, people look at it now and say gosh, they look at all the shortcomings of Generations, and it was a movie and a big budget, and it's insane that they had that Ron and Brannon wrote the script. They got to do the movie. They actually won a little competition with Maury Hurley, which is kind of weird. One of the great mysteries, about 2 or 3 years ago, I got to ask him about this, and he's sitting on it. But Rick Berman still has Maury Hurley's script for Generations, and nobody, it doesn't exist anywhere else because Hurley's dead. And
right.
And he says, oh, I'll get it out sometime. So at some point it may have been crap, who knows? But you know, they won the race to write the movie. They were kind of hedging their bets. Like, do we let the hot kids do it, or do I let somebody else that might want to come back? But anyway, so they did the Generation script like a year ago, and Jerry, who was running the show, Michael had kind of Jerry Taylor is like, they've had enough break. We'll let them write the finale. But they were like madly rewriting, and then they had to do the reshoots, you know, at the end on the mountain, and they were hemmed in. And meanwhile, they had to do this script in like a month. It was insane. They were literally, good thing they were all like, you know, 28 and 30. Because they had this grinder of a time. Yeah. And then when you know that and you look back and people go, how was All Good Things such a much more awesome, you know, 2 hours than the 2-hour movie? And they had so much more money and they had more. Well, it was just one of those. It was just one of those quirky things. And it's one of the amazing things. And they love to take credit for it and all that. But a thing that was really weird about it was they were having such a good time and they were kind of cranking on it. Originally, their first take was not that future Riker comes in with the future Enterprise, but, and stop me if you've heard this before. That's why my jaw was dropping. I got to ask Terry Metalis this question. I knew Terry when he was Brandon's assistant in the PA, but I said, did you ever read the first draft of All Good Things? Because in the first draft, the way they get a ship again, from, you know, he's future Picard, is they don't have Riker from that same time come and help them. Mm-hmm. They go to the Fleet Museum and steal the Enterprise D. They even have a tour. I have the pages. I've read it a couple of times.
That's too funny, because that's what they do in Picard.
Listen, that's in the future, right? They're all old, like the way you see them, right? White-headed, you know, David Stripe and all that. So all the way you see them in the future segment. In the original first draft, they all needed a ship. So they go to the Fleet Museum and they're with a little girl tour guide, like little 18, 20-year-old something, snappy, cheery tour guide who's like, da-da-da-da, and this was the domain of Chief Engineer, and she's given, and it's them. And but the whole time they're on the tour. It's like people when they did the Fan Fest or they would do the thing at Vegas. The whole time she's chattering away, they're walking around checking things. Oh, there's a little bit of the lithium still in the warp core. Oh, they're looking at it, seeing what shape it's in. Right. And then finally at the end, Worf she finally says, could you please step away from that? And Worf says some snappy line and pulls a phaser on her, and it ends with that. And then the next thing you know, they're flying the D, and that's the thing that gets them all back in the future. And so it's literally like and Michael Piller stepped in and said, I think that's a little too cute.
Pulling phaser on some teenager.
Yeah. So at the last minute, they got to first draft script stage. So I think it was the third. Something. Anyway, so they redid that and came up with the whole Riker from the and the 2-dimensional, the 3-dimensional space battle shooting Klingon and all that wacky stuff.
Right. I love that design. It was funny. Peter and I
That'll blow your mind.
Yeah, we started a Star Trek fan club a number of years back, and you have to choose a ship when you're part of SFI, which I don't really do fan club stuff anymore. We picked that design as our chapter, and we called it the USS Grand Petoskey. Petoskey for the state of Michigan, Grand for Grand Rapids, which is where we live. But I love that they called it a Galaxy X, or the SFI people gave it a different name. Anyway, I love it. It's kind of all over my house. I love that design so much. But it's a shame that we've never seen it again in canon. I don't think it really exists, because I don't think they ever brought it back, which is a shame. I like it. I mean, some people think, what's crazy, because it's got a big phaser gun on the bottom and it's got big phasers on the side of the bridge. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I love it. It's a beautiful warship. But
well, see, so everything about the future timeline that's wacky. Like they have, what is it, Warp 17 or something? Or
Warp 13, I think it was, yeah.
But the Future Enterprise, the future originally was the Future Klingon ship that Greg Jean cranked out and they built. But everything about it was, and then this was the most of all, it was like everything about this show in the future is going to be a dead-end timeline that we will never, ever see again because the movie's going to say what happened. They're going to crash the ship in the movie.
Right.
So everything, and which people didn't know, viewers didn't know that. But everything about this has been like, whatever you want to do, go for it. Like, get wacky, get crazy, because it's not ever going to be looked at again. And that includes everything from the future D to all the outcomes for everybody's lives.
The uniforms.
Which is weird because they made not the future D because it was added onto, but the Klingon, the future Klingon.
Oh yeah, the Negvar
was a built model, and it was too much to resist. After mid through DS9, they're like, let's go. Like, it's just sitting there not being used, and they didn't want to modify it. And it winds up, oh look, it's not just a future Klingon of an alternate timeline. It's very much being used.
It's totally here.
Klingon ship.
And two of the three kids that Geordi has.
Same
names. Two names they use in Picard.
Right. Yeah, I like it. They never do say who he married, though.
They still
didn't say if he married Leia Brown.
Sad, but
yeah, they don't mention it Picard. Yeah, but you're right. It was it was a seminal story for the time. It was like I said, it was a crazy time of my life. I absolutely adore it. But yeah, you're right. You do get the feeling that unlike DS9, very definitive ending, Voyager, they get home and that's the end of the show. This kind of felt like, well, at the end, we're playing a card game and it's just, we're going to go on and do other stuff, which is, I love the films. I love the TNG characters, but yeah, you're right. It's a finale that's not final, but it is the only finale that was totally planned for with the next step.
Yeah.
So it's weird, but it wasn't weird at the time, but it's more strange now, 31 years later, looking at it in that fashion.
It's
so
unique.
It's unique.
Well, it's
unique
weird because
New York.
It's like by the time you got to Next Gen, what the original cast went through was they were writing the book. They were they were making the paradigm. Like they were on a canceled little 3-year show that wound up being huge, and then they brought back movies 10 years later with the TV act. It's like it just broke the mold, and so there were all these expectations. Well, Next Gen is even bigger than the original series now. And and Paramount's like, let's do movies, and they're okay. And meanwhile, you're setting up, you've got 2 other spin-off shows, and that's kind of, but by the time you get to the end of those, it's like, well, the TNG movies are still happening. And guess what, kids? You've kind of divided the pie, and nobody is they're not as foamingly big, either DS9 or Voyager. So it's like, sorry, guys, no movies for you, and it's like, oh, we thought that was the news. No, it's just for them because they were first. And there's not enough, bandwidth for everybody to be mega heroes and icons.
It was just ridiculous.
I know. Now we've got the one thing about having the streaming era is they finally got it, which you were talking about it, Peter, about, I kept saying, look, it's all the same universe. I don't overdo it. Don't fan service it. But people still exist, and they don't have to be in the little box. Like so when Picard and then other shows, Lower Decks especially, but Picard, each season being a different series, I feel like sometimes, but each one of them, it's like these are people who live in that time frame. You can pluck, and Prodigy and Lower Decks did it too, but you can pluck people who are still alive and use them or use their voice, and they don't have to be in the little DS9 or Voyager box. Let them be part of the bigger universe. So it's not so segregated. Well, we can only hope for the future that they say legacy, but it's is the gas out of the tank? Who knows? We never knew that we'd have Picard. We never knew that we'd have any of the legacy material. That was the notion behind letting the book series go where they did.
Right.
It was like no one ever thought these things would ever be countermanded, or need to be. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, okay. So all good things off the table.
One last little note.
Please.
Throw back to Preemptive Strike. Preemptive Strike up until the last minute was called The Good Fight.
Oh, that works too. Preemptive Strike, I think, was
somebody said you've got good in 2 titles.
Yeah.
So they changed.
Absolutely.
Probably a wise choice.
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. Leaving all good things off the table. Let's pick a favorite and a least favorite. Larry, you're up. just of this bracket.
No, I know. Let me just say first, for years and years and years, I continue to get Firstborn and Bloodlines titles mixed up. Because to me, they could go either way, almost.
I did it when we started here. I mixed it
done
up,
that for years. I have to think. A favorite. I guess and see, now you've got the hindsight looking at it too. I guess Preemptive Strike. I don't dislike Emergence as much as you do, just because it was so wacky, and that's fine to me. And there were so many little weird little bits to it. I think Bloodlines and Jason to me is the most boring of the four.
Yeah, agreed.
Bad. I'll say that it's the most. Okay. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but just kind of yeah. And I'll say Preemptive Strike. To me, they're all just we're lining stuff up to get out the door before we get to do the finale.
Kind of cars in pole position. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Peter, what about you?
That's actually the ones that I was going to pick. My favorite would be Preemptive Strike, and my least favorite, just because it's kind of is Bloodlines. So,
I mean, I could say the same. But again, the Emergence just kind of for the fact that it was, I know, and Larry, you summed it up. So many of these episodes were very low stakes because we're like, well, we're just lining stuff up and this thing and that thing is going to happen. But at the end of the day, nothing happened. And like Peter, you said, maybe they planted a seed of something that could have been very like it's V'ger and it's out there floating around or whatever, and to never be heard from again, like the alien slugs at the end of season 1 that they did a follow up on in the DS9 books or something. It's like, yeah, you're right. It could have been a storyline, but as it is, it was like, okay, well, you did this thing and so what? So it would have made more sense earlier on or to do something with it. So. Well, all right. Good deal. And so with that, we have concluded Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It was
what?
Star Trek The Next Generation. because next we get into Deep Space Nine. See, I was playing 5-dimensional checkers here. Yeah. So yes, in our next episode, we will be getting into talking about Deep Space Nine. But in the meantime, Larry, having you here has been an absolute honor. This is terrific. I mean, it's like having the voice of the Enterprise on our show, the guy who seems to know nearly everything. So this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. Absolutely have you back again at any point. But where do people find you out there? Tell us about everything Larry does.
Well, thanks for having me on. I was going to say, I have not thought about these last 4 pre-finale episodes in ages. So it was kind of
cool.
Fun. Yeah. No, LarryNemecek.com and Larry Nemecek on Twitter X and Blue Sky and Instagram and all of that. But every Tuesday we have the Trek Files is released from Roddenberry and coming up on 13 seasons. And we just by the luck of the draw wound up with some awesome guests here to end up. Speaking of Ron Moore, we were just talking with Ron about the Inside Star Trek vinyl record when he was a kid and I was a kid, and how it affected him. And Jonathan Frakes is going to be our finale guest, and we're talking about an anniversary no one's talking about, which it's the Best of Both Worlds Mr. Worf Fire 35-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh, yeah, summertime. That's right. End of June.
For a world, I mean, on one hand, we had to wait 2 years almost for the Strange New World payoff. Yeah. But it's streaming, and you only got it's for a world that's not used to even what linear is out there. Anyway, the Trek Files has been awesome, but I still have Portal 47, which is my service company for deep diving. Like, this has been like a taste of what we get into with people who work behind the scenes. No actors, all behind the scenes people for digging deeper, and then the Trekland Treks tours, which has picked up here for location sites working.
That was how you and I met back in 2023. Yes. We met at Vasquez. I rounded a corner as much as you can do when you're in the desert. And I was like, you're Larry Nemecek. I know your face. It's snowing in LA. It was weird conflicts of weird stuff.
Was that the post? Was that the snow on the ground, or was that
correct? Yeah, this was just before Cruise 23. That's what April and I were doing out there.
Cruise group. I offered that as a special for people on the cruise, and it was very weird that we got to even get out there.
And I love. And then I saw you in Vegas later that year, and now we're here, so it's good stuff.
And now we're here, yeah. So now we're here. So doing on, and the Tuesday live show is every Tuesday at 1 Pacific.
I've been nudging Peter to get himself on Mission Log because that's one of the better Discords around. I love that community. community. Absolutely great
Yes,
community.
yes. I have to say, I have my own Patreon, but then the Mission Log Patreon is the Trekophiles way,
Yeah.
along with
And
all
they're
the other shows in Roddenberry.
And they're good folks. John and I talk all the time. I've been on Mission Log, and I love the community. So, Peter, where do people find you?
You can find me around the interwebs at Petrus Aquinas. I'm not terribly active, but you can find me mostly on Discord. You can also find me on ELH's Twitch and YouTube channel, where I am playing a Temerian engineer on a coaxial warp drive vessel.
I love it. You've got all the words in there. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and then you can also find me behind the scenes on Starship Excelsior, which actually did pick up that Bluegill storyline.
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
in season 3.
The Bluegills. I love
So
it.
what's your favorite Temerian saying, aphorism, whatever they?
Oh, I mean, the one that I use all the time to everyone is Shaka when the walls fell.
Oh.
But my game actually has one that we use for me, because I have terrible luck at rolling dice. So we now have Peter when the dice fell, because I roll horribly all the time.
I love it. Good stuff.
There you go.
And as for me, I am out there on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads as at the C3 TheCeeThree. Spend a ton of time on our Secret Friends Unite Discord, which is a great place to have conversations about all of pop culture. If you don't find us there, send one of us a note and we'll send you an invitation. But with that, we draw to a close. Thank you again, Larry, for being here with us. And as always, I will tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Peace and long life.
There you go. Trek well, everybody.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.